Hi, I'm Nancy Landrum. I'm a relationship coach. I have been interviewing, or I'm about to interview, Anne Marie Farino about a topic that will, I think, be very relatable to many of you. Those of us who have been widowed or who have had a child who died, we're a unique club. And it tends to be a topic that most people don't want to discuss. In our culture, there is kind of an aversion to death, and most of us at one time or another have just felt helpless and not known what to say or what to do to help someone who's grieving. So I'm really excited to share this topic with Anne Marie. Anne Marie, give us kind of an overview, a Cliff Notes version of your life.
Okay, thanks again for having me, Nancy. I will start with my first marriage. It was an 18-year marriage where we had three children, a boy, and a princess, a girl. And that marriage lasted 18 years. We had lots of miscommunications as life went on, lots of cracks in the marriage. And, when you have three children and you're navigating all three children, it's, that's very relatable, right? Everyone can relate to trying to keep everybody where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to be doing. I did have my oldest son, Richard, was troubled early on, and I never really understood why he was troubled. Started acting out in school. He um, just when he got older, he started smoking pot, which made him feel better. He would say, "Mom, pot makes me feel normal. Why isn't it legal?" Well, if he would be alive today, it is, right? Why isn't it legal? Because this gives me relief. And then from there, Richard went on to opioids, and eventually heroin, which was shocking to me as a very conservative person and mother and a conservative family. So Richard he struggled from the time he was 12 till the time he was 24.
Let me ask,
The crack
why did that marriage end? What prompted you to end the marriage?
The marriage ended because my ex-husband and I were not on the same page when it came to really Richard. Not re The other two children were doing more quote unquote normal things that kids do to get in trouble. Richard's behavior was more outsized behavior, which I, looking back, believe was a precursor for bipolar disorder. He had ADHD, he had anxiety. This created a lot of tension in the marriage. We were not, as I said, not on the same page, so we ended the marriage. I preferred to have, and I had 5 years after the marriage ended as a single mom. And those years were so freeing because we had I had my home to have my boundaries and rules in the home. And
Mhm,
I always told the kids, this is your peaceful place. My
mhm.
home is your peaceful place. So as time went on, Richard kept using, and I ended up meeting a man, believe it or not, on Match.com,
Okay.
which was really weird.
Uh-huh.
But he was a needle in a haystack. We dated for 3 years before we got married because we wanted to be sure that we could blend our families and that this was going to work. So we did get married, and Richard's story unfortunately ends what doesn't end.
Before you,
Richard,
Before you move on, Anne Marie, what is your current husband,
Oh, Tony.
Tony? And
Tony.
you have children?
Yes. So Tony has three children. And when we got married, his children were 15, 17, and 19. And I brought three children to the marriage who were 10, 16, and 19. We both had two boys and a girl, and we did call ourselves the modern day Brady Bunch. That year, we sent out our Christmas card with the grid, like the Brady Bunch, with the actual picture of Alice in the middle. And
Uh-huh.
it is, I still have it framed all over the house, and friends have said they take it out every year because it was their favorite all-time card, and it was a lot of fun shooting it too.
Uh,
So that, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
how did your children adjust to this marriage?
My children, lived with us full time, and they did adjust. Richard had a hard time with Tony a few times because if I didn't answer the phone right away, Richard would then call Tony's phone and say, "What are you making my mom not talk to me? Like, what's happening?" And really, it was sad because Tony loved Richard so much. They had a great relationship. Richard really approved of Tony, but I was not answering the phone because I was trying to maybe back off at the moment. I was doing maybe a little tough love at the moment. And Richard just didn't understand that and then would blame Tony. And then Tony, it would upset him. So, but my other son and daughter really loved Tony. My daughter was so, so young when they met. She was 8 or 7 when they met. And, that was very, very young. So she does consider Tony as her second dad because she spent growing up with Tony and I, and then with her dad on, every other weekend and, holidays and trips. So we really became their family. And then Tony's children lived with their mom, but then would have some weekends with us, the typical divorced family sharing children.
Mhm. And how did they respond to you as their father's new wife?
Well, that was interesting. They said they were happy. It I remember the wedding night, one of his sons just being very upset, like crying and very, very upset, which we felt terrible. But Tony and I knew that we loved each other so, so much that we would have to be on the same page with this family kind of coming through and becoming, a family. But it was it was difficult. I did have a conversation with the kids and I said, I'm not your mom. I'm not going to be your mom, but I am your dad's wife. So when you're staying with us in our home, we have our own boundaries that you may not have at your mom's house. And so we have rules and boundaries that we want you to respect those boundaries.
Mhm.
It, they didn't really respect the boundaries that well because they felt like they were being told what to do. So that was the, that was one thing that was difficult. An example is curfew, right? Curfew is everybody can relate to this. On the weekends, they were older then, they were high school, and then going into college. And I would say, on the weekends, we don't care what time you come home. As long as you're okay, it doesn't matter. But during the week, Tony and I work, and 11 p.m. is when you either come home or you stay somewhere else because I don't want to be up worrying all night.
Mhm.
And at the time, one of his children was 21, but still in college and staying with us for the summer. And that 21-year-old told the dad, I'm 21 and I can do whatever I want, and would just not do it.
Mhm.
That's when we weren't on the same page at all. And we did get to a point because we always had each other's back, but we got to the point where we had to say in certain instances to give the other parent space with their biological children and agree to disagree on your parenting style and my parenting style because sometimes they're really different.
When I had a somewhat similar story in that my first husband died, and 13 years later, I married Jen Landrum, and we agreed to continue being single parents to our teenage children because they were too old to accept another parent. But we wanted to co parent his 8-year-old son. But my style of parenting was so different than Jim's. He was so much more permissive. I was very loving and affectionate, but there are rules and there are consequences. And what started out as a minor disagreement between us grew until we were fighting almost every day. Finally got some help. And the coach that we worked with finally said to me, you need to stop being or stop trying to be Jimmy's parent and let Jim take over, as a single parent, basically. And that was so heartbreaking because I really loved Jimmy and I wanted what was best for him. And of course, doing it my way was what was best.
Yes.
But when I got out of the picture, it was very interesting. Jim began to be a better parent because I wasn't in the triangle with them.
Yes.
As long as I was involved, he could blame me if Jimmy got upset or whatever. And when I was out of the picture, he expected Jimmy's behavior to get better, and instead it got worse. And
Oh, no.
he began to be more of an authority, setting reasonable rules. He began to do what I had been arguing for 6 years
Wow.
because I was out of the picture. And years later, we felt so guilty, like we were total failures at co-parenting. But years later, we found out that all the research that's been done on step families, if there is disagreement about parenting a child, then the biological parent has to be the primary parent. The step parent is only there to back up the
Right.
biological parent, whether you agree with what they're doing or not.
Right.
That was such a challenge for me. There were some times when I saw Jim doing something with Jimmy and I would have to leave the room because it struck me as so not in Jimmy's best interest, which Jim, much later admitted to, that there were ways that he had parented that he wished he'd done much differently. But the concept of the biological parent remaining the primary parent who makes all the parenting decisions with the step parent only backing them up is something that has been demonstrated by multiple research outcomes.
And I totally agree with that. And that for us happened organically. It
Mhm.
happened situationally when situations would present themselves. And that did happen with Tony and his children completely. And it did happen with my children because, as I said, we did agree to disagree on some of our parenting styles
Yes.
because another example, and I think other people can relate to this too, is a child, that keeps stealing the credit card to spend money on lavish things. And it would come up every month and he would get angry and he'd change the number on the card. And he would get angry, but then that was it. Then it was over. So it kept happening. It
Yeah.
kept happening. And on my side of the fence, I kept thinking, okay, I would be grounding the teen,
Yeah.
take, taking the car away, something, but I was not in their home. I don't know what happened in their home. And you also get to that point too. You weren't in their home. And these kids were, like junior high, high school, and then into college.
Yes.
And you don't know the dynamics that went on. And
Yeah.
that's another really important thing to keep in the back of your head, because when having, empathy for what's going on with a stepchild, I
Mhm.
think that's very important.
I think it's very common, both with the death of a parent or a divorce, that the remaining biological parent often makes parenting decisions based on guilt or pity. And guilt and pity are two really bad reasons to make parenting decisions. You rarely make a good decision when it's coming from either guilt or pity.
Yes. And I can totally relate to guilt of, the divorce
Hmm.
on both sides, so you do want to, some people, parents, and I've fallen in that category too. I know you want to make your kids feel better,
Right.
and you can talk till you're blue in the face, but then I found that, spending obviously quality time with them and taking them on a trip by yourself, all of those things, are, I felt so much better than buying them things, or, the time together and the relationships.
I made the mistake when Jim and I got married of thinking that my relationship with my two boys was solid, didn't have to worry about it. So I spent a lot of energy building relationship with my new husband and with his three children. I found out later that both of my boys felt abandoned, like they weren't important to me anymore, which, was so far from the truth. But I didn't recognize that because that transition into a step family was such a big thing for them, all they really had known most of their life was the three of us together.
Right.
They needed more alone time with me than we'd ever spent. I mean, before we were always just the three of us. They needed me more.
Mhm.
And I regretted later, in many conversations with them, I expressed my regret and apologized, and fortunately they forgave me. But it was a big wound between us.
And when you realized they felt that way, I'm sure you were utterly shocked,
Oh, shocked and brokenhearted.
totally brokenhearted, but so happy that you came together, and at the end of the day, it
We
worked.
all three of us did a lot of healing work
Mhm.
over the years. It took a while, took quite a while. So
Yeah.
tell us more about Richard. You mentioned his ADHD and later, possibly bipolar. So the drugs, my son Stephen also began smoking pot when he was 15. He was an ADHD kid, and long before they had a name for it,
Mhm.
he was just considered a problem child by the teachers and challenging for me. But he told me also that the very first time he smoked pot, he felt relief from the anxiety inside for the first time. And he was instantly hooked.
And I had the exact same experience with my son, Richard. It's blowing me away that you and I are connecting in this way, because that's exactly what Richard said. Mom, why isn't pot legal? It makes me feel normal.
Yes.
Makes me feel normal. And they self-medicate because
Yeah,
they're hurting.
with all that is known, that comment would have been the biggest red flag clue that there was something going on emotionally, mentally in
Yes,
their body that needed attention.
yes. So there was a lot of he had got a lot of attention. We took him, his behavior was was very funny. He was very, very funny, made everybody laugh. But his behavior was always not that he walked down the road less traveled. This kid swung from the treetops. He did anything and everything. He'd walk down that road thinking, this is a great idea. Go party with my friends. He would meet people and he ended up on Wiz Khalifa's yacht in Lake Michigan one night with supposedly one of the um, I don't know, siblings of, another famous rapper. And then he thought it was a good idea to take the train from Chicago to our house in the suburbs and knock, 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 3 in the morning. I open the door and he's standing there with these guys who I didn't know. Um, One of them was supposedly Bob Marley's sons or grandsons or whatever. And Richard said, Mom, you've got to let us in. I said, Richard, it's 3 in the morning. He's like, Mom, I told him you like Lenny Kravitz and he knows Lenny. You got to let us in. And against my better judgment, I let them in and then said, well, you're going to have to sleep in the basement, which sounds bad, but I'm an interior designer. So it was very pretty, had good sheet count. I was just like, go down there. And then the next day, when I got these fellas out of our home, I walk upstairs and underneath my pillow, there was a pair of really crusty jeans with a note that said, to Richard's mom, a gift of Lenny Kravitz's blue jeans.
Oh, gee. Oh, wow.
It's like, well, I'm sure they're not Lenny Kravitz's blue jeans, but how hysterical is that? Like I was creeped out and laughing at the same time. So the it just kept getting wilder, these wild, just anything he would do is just like over the top.
Mhm.
So we had him at many programs, inpatient, outpatient. Um, he ended up using heroin, unfortunately, and he got pulled over. And of course, that's a felony. Even if, he wasn't distributing, he was using it for self-use. So he got arrested. We went to court, and the court gave us permission to take him to a rehab in a different state. And we did. And I think the fear of the judge saying that, welcome to the world of felonies where your life is no longer your own, it's mine. And
Right.
I still want to hug that judge. Like I still want to hug her because it got him to go there. He was sober for 3 years
Mhm.
and I would see him twice a month. He lived in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I would visit him all the time. And he was sober. And that gave us those 3 years together and spending really wonderful time.
Mhm.
Um, Unfortunately, in 2016. Um, well, he came out as gay. So I thought that was what was deep in him this whole time that he was medicating because he didn't feel like he could tell his family. Now, when he told me that, I was like, thank God. And he goes, what? I said, I feel like there's been just a huge weight lifted off my chest because I've been worried about your inner we can't get to it. What's wrong? What's happening inside? And I'm
Yeah.
like, is this it? And he said, I just didn't think that people would accept me. And I said, well, honey, you're my son. I accept you, of course. So he ended up getting engaged to a transgender woman, and they seemed very, very happy. He had a job. He was running a huge store, and he was like a vegan. They had a great home. Everything seemed to have fit until I got a call saying that he had been taken by an ambulance to the hospital, called the hospital, and sadly, the doctor said, "There's no easy way to tell you that your son died tonight."
Wow, what a shock,
What a shock.
especially after all those rough years and then lately thinking he's pulling it together. Things look good. He's stable.
Yes, he was getting married. He had a great job. They had a beautiful apartment that had a room in it for me. So I was just like,
Mhm,
yes, I thought I was gonna be spending a lot of time with them.
mhm.
So I did go to a lot of grief therapy. And what I want to say about my grief is the therapy was so, so, so critical in me being able to get out of bed, take a shower, go for a walk, because they put you on, or the therapist put me on a schedule, which kept me upright.
Mhm.
And being upright was the first thing that I could do. Then I would go for a walk. Those you're learning how to do everything again because you're in such shock.
Right. How did he die? What was the reason for his death?
He died by suicide.
Okay. I am so, so sorry, Anne Marie, after what, 15 years of grieving because of his lifestyle, and then a few years where you had hope.
Big hope because he was so, as I said, so charismatic, such a quick wit.
Mhm.
He had a very, very big, he had a big love for homeless people. I want to talk about his heart for just a second. He would make sandwiches and he would take his bike and he would ride around and find homeless people and sit down next to them. He didn't just give them food, he sat down next to them and said, "Tell me your story. I want to hear about you."
Empathy, what a gift.
Such a gift. He had a huge, huge heart and a huge $1 million smile. And those are the things that I keep so close to my heart.
Mhm.
But what therapy taught me about his death is that even with the unrelenting love of his family, his parents, his friends, his fiance, even with all of that, he was in so much pain. Like his body was on fire, and the only way he knew how
Mhm.
to, he had to leave the pain behind.
Mhm.
So after a few years, therapy taught me that his death was unstoppable.
Mhm.
It's a very hard place to get to.
Oh gosh, yes.
A very hard place to get to. And we all get stuck in between. And I pray that people that read this will maybe start to do the work.
Yes.
We have to do the work to get to a place where we can find some joy again. And that takes a long time because the first time you laugh, you feel like, oh, I can't laugh.
Right.
Can't laugh. You feel
My
guilty
son
about
died.
laughing.
How dare I laugh? My son died.
Yeah, like I can't laugh. And it took a really, really long time. It took me about 7 years not to feel guilty about it. And I just I want anyone to know there's so many survivors out there of catastrophic death. no matter how it happened, that you're not alone. And there are people like us, like you and me, that can get out there and talk about it and talk about different ways to work on it.
Anne Marie and I, in before we began recording this interview, discovered how parallel our lives have been, how much we have in common. My son Stephen, he was using heavy drugs on and off for 15 years, and in his case, it damaged his heart. So at the age of 27, he was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. We didn't know when he was hospitalized if he would even live through the night. And that following day, the doctor said they they gave him diuretics because a lot of fluid had gathered around his heart. He lost 22 pounds in excess fluid that had been putting pressure on his heart and making it hard to breathe. The doctor said he can possibly live for a while, but he could die any day. And Jim and I agreed that he could come home to live with us. He couldn't do the work he had been doing. And for 2.5 years, I lived with this adult son who was very difficult to live with. He was still ADHD, and I didn't know it, but he was still using. So his behavior was very erratic, and we continued his journey of finally he decided about 2 years after the diagnosis, his heart continued to get worse, of course, and he knew that he would not live much longer. He decided that the only way he could die with self-respect was to die clean. He cut out all the drugs, cut out smoking, cut out beer. I don't know why the detox didn't kill him. It was so severe. But he gave us both about 4 months of the real Steve back. Because when anyone is using a substance that alters your behavior, it alters your personality, it's very, your vision becomes very self-absorbed. It's hard to think of the needs or wants of other people. For 5 months, I had a sweet Stephen back before he died.
Wow.
So I've often, not often, I shouldn't say that, but I have thought of his death as a form of suicide, because when you're using drugs for 15 years and you know your heart is compromised and you can die any day and you keep using anyway, I just completely underestimated the power of addiction. Particularly, it's so powerful, particularly when the addiction was helping him to feel better. Because, we keep doing whatever makes us feel better.
Yeah. Addiction is horrible disease, and it's it's with someone their whole life, and
Yes,
it they are managing it when they're sober. They're managing it. Relapses happen, as you know, all the time, and you just, what a blessing that you had those months
yes.
with
It's
him, being
precious.
precious moments and time with him.
Mhm.
That that's amazing, and what a true gift. And I did have Richard for, the last 3 years of his life. He was sober. And
Mhm.
so as I said, I would visit him a few times a month. And I remember one Christmas we went and stayed in St. Paul at a hotel and had the people bring up a Christmas tree and spent Christmas with him. And
Oh gosh.
so, those memories are true gifts, and they're very comforting, very comforting.
How did you feel about yourself after he committed suicide? Were there any judgments you made about yourself? After Stephen died, shortly after he died, it was like this giant boulder of self judgment landed on my
On your head.
shoulders. Like, I must have been a bad mother because I had a son for a drug addict. What did I do wrong? What could I have done better to prevent this from happening? It took a very committed, strenuous process for me to forgive myself for judging myself as a bad mother. And like you, the recognition eventually came that Stephen made choices that I had no control over.
And many choices that you had no idea about.
Yeah,
There's
right.
there are many choices that you don't know about, and when you find out, you're shocked, but then you're not shocked. So when Richard passed away, um, he had talked about it through the years a little bit.
Mhm.
Before he died, night before he died, he sent the family a picture of himself grilling my vegan sausages, having a little wine, listening to Marvin Gaye. It's a great day, Mom. And a picture of him at the grill, smiling, looking happy. And afterwards, I found out he sent that to our family and our friends that become family.
Yes.
Was I shocked? Yes. Was I shocked? No. But when the doctor told me that he had passed away, I kind of thought in my head, what is he saying? What is he even talking about?
Mhm.
And, I went into such raw shock for
Mhm.
a very long time. So I must have believed the doctor because the
Oh,
shock came crashing down on me, right? Right then. And it made me numb. And I, of course, thought of what could I have done differently. But I did a lot of research and
mhm.
we sent him to the best places you could to inpatient, outpatient, as I said. We did we did so much to the point where when he was in rehab and got sober, they made him for an activity add up all of the money that
Yeah.
was spent on his addiction through all of these private schools and all these things. And he then had a meeting with me and said, Mom, do you realize it's this much? And I was like, it can't be that much. So anyway, we did so much. I don't think we could have done more. I
Yeah.
don't I don't think so.
Everything you could.
Did. And I mean, as I use the word unstoppable a lot because our love is unstoppable. And I feel his love every single day.
Mhm.
And yes, there are days where I cry because I can't believe he's not here.
Mhm.
And just at that moment, I might get a monarch butterfly flying around my face.
Um,
And maybe somehow Richard sent that to me. I would like to think so. So
I,
those moments carried me through because there's no coincidences in the world. And it's that has really helped so much.
I've, like you, I haven't seen monarch butterflies, but I'm very aware at times of Stephen's presence being very close and supportive of me, cheering for the work I do. And
Yeah.
I wrote a book about my part of the process of, in my case, disconnecting from codependency along the route. And I knew I had Stephen's blessing to share of my part of the story in that book.
And I know I have Richard's blessing in sharing his story and getting out into the world to hopefully help support others.
Mhm.
No, he'd do it for me.
Yes.
That's who he was.
Yeah.
So I found my purpose now.
Tell us more about the work you're currently doing as a result of this whole experience.
So I'm working on I was just on a podcast recently. So I'm working on getting on podcasts, speaking engagements. I write articles, and I did the walk for American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. It's an 18-mile walk overnight.
Mhm.
It's pretty cool. We did it in San Diego, which is where actually my ex-husband is from. And we used to go there every summer. So that was like Richard saying, "It's in San Diego. That's my favorite place, Mom." So we had Team Richard, and he had a tattoo of Snoopy. So Snoopy was our mascot. And his aunts and my best friends, we went and we walked overnight. You're walking into the dark and out of the light.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Gives me goosebumps.
That that I continue to be involved with them because it's the biggest organization of its kind in the world, and they're amazing. So speaking, and I have a memoir in progress right now, so that is hopefully will be finished in the next short time here. So that is in the works.
Good.
Then just getting out into the world as much as I can and speaking to groups is the goal.
Is
And my,
it is it specifically you're speaking about to parents who have lost a child to drugs, or are you speaking about recovering from the grief, or is it all connected?
it's all connected. I speak to a lot of different groups. One group kind of sticks out to me. It was a church group, and it was all women. It was like their guild, with all their, and it was a church group. And I told Richard's story. And
Hmm.
I told a little bit, about what happened. I shared some of the crazy stories because there's a lot of crazy fun stories. They're funny stories. Like you can't believe this kid got into what he got into. And and I shared the story, and then I shared a lot of the moments that have happened in my life that are not coincident, and they're big ones. They're really like I like a saying in a fortune cookie that Richard had. I bought Richard a. I just have to tell you this little one.
Like to hear it, believe me.
So when Richard was sober, I was in a store that a friend of mine, Mary, owned, and I bought a little trinket tray, and it said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take," by Wayne Gretzky. Great quote, loved it, thought, how cute, I'll bring it to him. Richard had that on his nightstand until the day he died. Fast forward, I get a box from his apartment. I open it up. I forgot about the tray was in there, the Wayne Gretzky tray, and I was so happy to have it. Then I got a call from my friend who owned that store, had moved to the West Coast. And I got a call that unfortunately her daughter had left by suicide.
Oh,
And she didn't know what to do. So she called me and asked me to come out. I said, "Tell me when you want me to come out."
mhm.
She said, "Okay, I want you to come out at this point." So we were at her home with a fire on, blankets. She's vegan, like Richard was. And we were having Asian food, and we got our fortune cookies. My fortune cookie said, "Now remember, this is the woman I bought this trinket tray at her
Yes,
store,
yes,
and now both of our kids are in heaven."
yes.
My fortune cookie said, "You have a lot of friends." I was like, "Gosh, these are so silly."
So,
She opened,
yeah.
they're so generic. Yeah. And then she opens hers, and it said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take."
Oh my gosh.
Can you stand it? And then,
Richard was comforting her.
yes. And I said, okay, Richard and your daughter are up in heaven. They're having a fun banter back and forth, like, which mom needs this more? And obviously, they gave it to the, the
Yeah.
a new mom who had just lost her child. And it
Oh,
was unbelievable. What a moment.
I love stories like that because they give us, at least for me, it's reassuring. I know that Stephen is in heaven, but at one point in time, a few months after he died, I got a very clear message from him that said, when it's your turn to come, I'll be the first one to hug you. Oh gosh. And I know that's coming. I'm looking forward to it. I just celebrated my 80th birthday.
Happy birthday.
I'm in good health. I plan to live another decade, but I'm not at all afraid of when it's time for me to leave this earth.
Because you know you're going to be with them again
Yes,
until we meet again, right?
yes.
Yeah, I believe that too. Really.
Anne Marie, is there anything in closing that you'd like to say that we haven't covered?
I would just like to say that, and I said it before, that there are so many survivors out there, and
Mhm,
there's so many parents out there that are looking for answers.
mhm,
And I do believe there is help out there, and that, again, they're not alone.
mhm.
And if people can take a few words away from this interview that you've said or I've said, then that is a huge, huge blessing.
Mhm.
I do believe I have a saying, trust in yourself and butterflies will follow.
Oh, that's cute. Really sweet. Well, I'd like to close by saying that it is possible to recover joy in your life after such a major loss, but it does require intention to
Yeah,
live, not just to survive, but to live, and to do the work uh, to process out all of the negative feelings or the negative impact that your child's death may have had on you. But
yes,
it is possible to enjoy life after such a major loss
it is. It's possible to find joy and laugh again and live again.
and love again. In case anyone is interested, the book I wrote about my experience with Stephen is called Pungent Boundaries. You can find it on my website, which is nancylandrum.com. And Anne Marie will soon be having a book come out about her experience. So remember her name, Anne Marie Ferrantino, Farino. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. And I do have a website that's annemarieffarino.com. So anything
Yes.
happening that will be updated on there.
And imagine that you have a schedule of your speaking events or podcasts that is posted on your website. Is that correct?
That's going on.
Okay.
My web designer is working on that
It's
as we
evolving. It's
it's evolving. Yes.
Anne
Yeah.
Marino.com. Anne Marie Marino Farino.com.
Farino.com. Yes.
You better say it. I said it wrong.
Anne Marie Farino, Farino.com.
And Anne is spelled without an E at the end.
That's a really good point. Yes, no E.
It's been such a pleasure speaking with you today and sharing so many common experiences. I have so much respect for the work you did for yourself to learn to love again and live again and experience joy. And not only that, but to find a purpose in all of this, of helping other parents who are experiencing this depth of grief. So much
And
respect for you, Anne Marie.
thank you. And I have so much respect for you, and learning your story was amazing today. I'm going to get the book. I cannot wait to read it. And yes, shared experiences. We were meant to be together today, and I
So,
do so much respect for you, and joy for you too. And I thank you so, so much for inviting me today. It really was wonderful.
my privilege.
Thank you. Mine too.
We'll say goodbye for now.
Say goodbye for now. Thank you.